Well, hey there, all you cool cats and kittens. Welcome to another episode of the Age Groupies Podcast, part of the United WeCast Network. I'm Mike Ergo, and along with my co-host Lindsay Hiken, we're here to talk to you about all things related to endurance sports from an amateur athlete perspective. We talk about how to have fun along the way and make our sports a little less intimidating. You can follow the show on Instagram at Age Groupies, join our Age Groupies page on Facebook, and look us up by name, Lindsay Hiken and Mike Ergo on Strava. If you have questions, comments, or topic ideas, feel free to email us, agegroupies@gmail.com. If you guys like the show, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, guys, enjoy the episode. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the Age Groupies Podcast. My name is Lindsay Hiken, as you know, and I'm here today with my friend Amy Outman, who has been on the show before. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Hi, Lindsay.
Good.
Doing great. How are you doing today?
Good. So listeners, as you may know, if you've listened to other episodes, before I started doing triathlon, I was super into yoga, and I became a certified yoga instructor, but I haven't taught in a long time because I'm just doing other stuff, but I still love yoga. And Amy is not only a friend of mine, and she was on the episode last fall after we did a triathlon together, but she's an amazing yoga teacher who has a huge practice and runs a yoga studio here basically in Half Moon Bay. And it's just, I'll just say this. I can be picky about the yoga classes I take because I've been through training, and I can tell when people are phoning it in or whatever, or not really being intentional about the practice that they're creating as a teacher. And I love taking Amy's classes. So I thought it'd be good to have her come on and talk a little bit about how yoga can support us in our sport, both from a perspective of, mobility and strength, and also from the perspective of recovery. So I'm glad you have the time to fit me in today, Amy. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Lindsay. I'm blushing. You can't see it, but I'm blushing.
Oh, you're hilarious. So, okay. Well, first of all, tell me a little bit about your yoga background, just kind of how you got into it. And because I think there's so much out there about yoga, and some of it is awesome and some of it's weird. It's like there's weird yoga models on Instagram.
Right.
And then it's just a lot of stuff. And so I think sometimes it can be intimidating for people to get into, or they don't know what it is. They don't know why they want it. But how did you get into it?
That is a good place to start because yoga is so vast. And I think that when people hear the word yoga, they have their own personal experiences or stories about what that is. And the truth is, for some people, when they think of yoga, they think of a very hot room and 26 postures that are done at a particular cadence. Some people, in many areas, yoga is meditation, and that's all it is. Here in the United States, it's more connected with more of a physical practice, more of like a hatha yoga, where we move our body in asana. But the style of yoga that I'm really drawn to is in the tantric tradition, and it's really very vast. It's all encompassing. It involves using yoga postures with the body. It also involves doing a lot of different breath work and meditation techniques. It also looks at lifestyle, and even, there's an aspect which is included in kind of the area of yoga, which we call Ayurveda, which addresses the foods that we eat and even the company we keep. And so it can really be very broad. And so I guess if someone is listening to this, I just encourage people to have an open mind, because really there are so many different aspects. And part of the joy for me on this yogic path is finding the type of yoga, finding the aspects of yoga that just feed me and help me along this path. And that, in this particular topic that we're talking about today, what the way that yoga enhances my physicality and my ability to compete in a triathlon, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I found yoga. Yeah. I found yoga as a young person. My aunt was my first yoga teacher. I discovered yoga in high school as a way to just find some time for myself in what felt like a very distracting time in life. It allowed me to just get quiet and have some time to myself and connect with what was going on with me. And then, I've pretty much practiced yoga on and off since then. So it's been a long journey. And I think I got certified, 2002 maybe, and have been teaching ever since then.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think for me, I started, I guess, like right around when I got sober. So about 16 years ago, just same thing as a way to find some quiet, in the midst of all the changes I was going through. It's like a way for me to learn how to just, be in my body and feel comfortable, because there was so much just when you're quitting drinking, there's a lot of physical sort of detoxing type stuff, and just I felt fidgety, and yoga was a way to help that. And the other thing is I have I had scoliosis and I have a bad back, and I've had these incidents where my back had gone out completely a couple of times, like where one time I had to use a walker. I was like in my early 30s, and I had a doctor, Kaiser, who was like East Indian, and she said, "Have you done yoga?" And I said, I tried it, and she said, "You need to do yoga regularly and you won't have to use a walker." I was like, sold, and so it was great for me. And I will just address one quick thing, because I know in recent years, and there have been some scandals, quote unquote, within the yoga community with various founders. I came in sort of doing Anusara yoga, there was a scandal of founder of Anusara yoga. And then we have Netflix came out with the Bikram documentary last year, and that wasn't great either. But the thing is that despite whatever goes on with these founders, is that it's such a personal journey that I guess what I have to say is that shouldn't impact anyone's, willingness to try it out. Because for me, it's like Anusara was started by a guy. I never met the guy, so fortunately for me, I didn't have any issues there, and I got a lot out of the yoga, regardless of what the personality associated with it was doing. And so I've had people say to me like, "Oh, these yogis are a bunch of, it's kind of BS," but that's not really true. I just think like anything, there's people in the community who aren't great, but I think that's true of every community. And I would say most people are really great and sincere, and are trying to find their own path within the yoga world. So I just wanted to kind of say that, because I know we probably have a lot of listeners who are into physical activity but are not particularly familiar with yoga, and maybe only what they hear about is Netflix documentaries.
Yeah, that's true.
Which aren't just like people going, "Oh, I really found myself through yoga," because that's not that interesting, right? So
yeah, just on that note, I'll just maybe add to it a little bit. It is interesting. And I think that because yoga it does cultivate a lot of kind of awareness and even power and empowerment. And, I think that that's also something that can be taken advantage of with really strong personalities. And like you said, there's probably a lot of different areas where that can be true. But maybe separating that, principles before personalities type of thing. And also, in going out and finding a practice and finding a teacher, I think it is really important to be discerning and to do research and be mindful about, just practices that you want to engage in with the right people.
Yeah. I feel like it's on the one hand, the like westernized version of yoga has a lot to do with, less to do with meditation, for example, and more to do with physical movement of the body and connecting with your breath, which I love too. But, different from, because I was already an athlete when I started doing yoga, and my very first class was at, the gym. My first classes were at the gym, and those classes were fine, and it was good for entry level, so I could understand what, Warrior One is, for example. But when I started going to a studio and taking Anusara is when I realized that the benefit of yoga for me came from like regular and consistent practice. It's a little different than like going out on a run. You could be completely not fit and go out on like a mile run and get a ton out of it. With yoga, there's a lot to learn to get something out of it. So I've had, like with Josh, for example, I tried to get him to do yoga to increase his mobility, especially, because he rides so much. And then as he's aging, he's getting really tight in the hips. And I'm like, how about yoga? And he kind of tries a posture swing and was like, I can't do it, and then he's done. And it's like, it's a different thing than maybe it's not a sport. That's like something we need to kind of keep in mind, as we're talking to athletes on this podcast. It's like, this is not a sport. So it's a different type of approach you have to have. It's like a willingness to just not do it perfectly. It's not competitive. You will benefit more if you do it more consistently. If you try it once and go, oh, I didn't feel anything, I would suggest that that's probably because the first bit, you don't really know how to do the postures correctly. You're not able to, you haven't cultivated sort of a practice yet. And so what you perceive as quote unquote getting something out of it, you may not be able to see the benefit immediately, but it won't take very long if you just give it a little bit of time. I mean, that was sort of my experience with it. Yeah.
And I think with the focus on the physical, and especially like you said, in social media, and we see pictures of people doing these postures, that there's this idea that it has to look a certain way. And that's really not true. And I think that, so it can feel easier, like we're failing at something when it doesn't look this particular way. So with yoga, so much of it is an inside job. It's really about how it makes you feel. And to me, that's one of the greatest benefits of yoga. Yes, we access it through getting into these interesting shapes and postures. But so much of it is just the stretch, finding your own personal edge and not necessarily having it look like something on the outside.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's key, important. And I think, I'll just say this before we get in deeper in terms of how the practice can support athletes. One of the things that I learned in yoga that I apply most when I'm doing my sport, especially during an event, especially during something long like Ironman, is I got into these classes where they were holding the postures a little bit longer. So it wasn't just this flow where you're just like, go, 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 as holding, and it would become uncomfortable.
Yes.
And not even necessarily so physically uncomfortable. Like I wasn't hurting myself, but it would just be uncomfortable. And my brain would kick in and start saying like, I don't want to do this anymore. How long are we going to stand in this Warrior 2? It's like, I want to put my arms down or whatever. Right. And the teacher that I really liked and went to all her classes, when I was kind of new in yoga, would say, learning how to be calm in the midst of exertion. And or effort. And I was like, oh, calm in the midst of, it's like finding that place of being calm, even though my arms hurt and I'm tired, it's like my legs are shaking or whatever. That's been hugely important. When my brain starts popping up, on Ironman, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I still have to pedal 40 more miles and die. It's like just that connecting back to my breath and letting it go and being like, I'm just going to be calm here in the midst of this. It's been very, very beneficial.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, facing that challenge in any situation and calling on it's like that mental and physical strength, like re-engaging that through yoga. I love that. Yeah, that's helped me a lot too. Not in my sprint triathlon.
I don't know. I mean, you described kind of freaking out in the water and connecting your breath.
That's true.
So that you didn't end. I mean, because if you think about it, like if you hadn't had that ability, you might have ended up tapping out. Because you can always tell one of those paddleboard people, like, I'm done, right? You know what I mean? And you might have not been able to get it together mentally. So that's,
Oh yeah, it's true. I've definitely used my yogic techniques in all three of those sports, really, just to calm down or to fire up. I mean, I also, there's that aspect of the challenge of staying calm in the midst of a lot of chaos. And then also of stepping up to the task and pushing harder when it doesn't feel like there's anything left or, whatever. It's just accessing that physically and mentally.
Right.
Through using these various techniques. I mean, there's a breathing technique that I use that I've been using a lot with biking. That's been.
Ooh, can you describe that?
Oh my gosh. I could try. Doesn't
have to be in perfect,
Okay.
Because think about it this way. There are probably people listening who have never done any yoga. So I mean, I can think of, we had hours and hours of different breathing practice when I was, so I can envision what you're, so there may be people who have no idea what you're even talking about.
Okay.
Like breathing technique. Don't we just breathe?
Right.
Is that something that happens automatically?
So there's a breathing technique which basically accesses core power. And so it really stimulates the diaphragm, and it's kind of a mental technique as well as a physical technique. And so the idea is that you have your focus around your abdomen. And when you breathe in, the diaphragm muscle actually drops down to pull the air into the lungs. And you just kind of imagine oxygenating like a fire, the subtle fire. So we're using visualization, we're using concentration, and then we're actually physically breathing in. And I'm just afraid it's going to sound too far out for people listening, but okay. So your inhale, and you just imagine like energy dropping down into the belly. You feel your belly expand. And when you exhale, you kind of scoop up from the pelvic floor, and it's like energy is lifting up and in, and it actually tracks the physical movement of the diaphragm muscle that's moving to pump air in and out. So the technique is you inhale, usually through the nose. It can also be through the mouth if you're breathing really hard, into the belly. And when you exhale, kind of scooping up and in from the pelvic floor. And so the diaphragm muscle is actually pushing breath out of the lungs and mimics that lifting action. But you as a practitioner, and me when I'm like trying to ride my mountain bike up a steep section, I'm using that breath just to focus on my core strength. And I've been doing it for a long time, and I can definitely feel the difference when I'm focusing there on my core and focusing on my breath. So
I can see a couple benefits to this. So I can totally visualize the fire and the energy flow. And I mean, because that's my jam. I'm a little woo-woo like that. My co-host Mike might be like, what
are you talking about?
Right. I don't know though. I mean, you never know. Mike meditates every day, so he might be able to visualize that too. But even if you can't visualize that, I mean, athletes are pretty used to visualizing, things anyway. I mean, I think that's part of becoming an athlete. So say you're not down with the fire and the energy, the idea of taking a deep breath that goes into your belly as opposed to just in your lung, I think benefits, whether you're running, riding, swimming, whatever, but riding, especially when you start climbing, you can start that shallow breathing, and that's not going to support your body in keeping, pushing forth with this effort, because it's this like shallow kind of breath that's barely coming in and barely bringing any oxygen in or out. So just the deep breathing, I find, helps with helps me maybe climb better. It calms me down. And also then connecting the core. I mean, people often say, oh, my back hurts when I climb or whatever. And I've experienced that too. And it's a lack of engaging the core while riding your bike.
Yeah.
And,
I found that too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Physically,
So,
I mean, that's the other really great benefit to all of this is it's like the way we breathe, the way we hold our bodies in a particular sport can make a tremendous difference, especially if you're dealing with injury, like you mentioned with the back. Yeah, it can be really powerful. And also this is the other piece, there's so many different breathing techniques that we can use because sometimes that shortness of breath can actually help accelerate you. But like in a long, hard climb, yes, you want to engage your core, support your back. That kind of deeper diaphragmatic breath can be really helpful.
Yeah. And, I did learn something in yoga about pushing a breath out really quickly and engaging my diaphragm in that way. And I have been able to use that when I've been trying to go really fast, like chasing a team member up a climb when I'm fit and don't have knee issues. And you know what I mean? And I definitely don't want to do too long and slow because that's just going to slow my spinning down to a crawl, because I'm going to be super relaxed. And so I can't, but even with that, and it comes from practicing yoga, I'm still not doing shallow chest breathing. I'm still bringing it all the way in and pushing it out just at a, a faster rate. And so that ability to not chest breathe was something that I wouldn't say I didn't have it before yoga, but I was never conscious of my breath.
Yeah. And it's great for recovery too. And it engages the parasympathetic nervous system that, that short breath is often associated with the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight. And whenever you take a deep breath, it begins to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is just more of that, restore and recover.
Yeah, so to circle back to feeling panicked in the water, I think a lot of that is related to people's breathing. I mean, most people who are at the start of a triathlon have been swimming. They've been practicing. So they can swim and they have a wetsuit on. So they're not really in any danger, but a little mental, a little freaked out about stuff, some adrenaline going, and then maybe cold water. You start this quick breathing and you can hear people sometimes in the water breathing in a way that is probably sort of inducing more panic.
That's true. And I mean, the word yoga means to yoke. And so, one aspect of that in that panic state is you can just start to lose it and get really distracted and panicked. And so coming into that yogic state of mind where you kind of bring it all together, it's going to be okay. Everything's connected here, kind of that calming voice. And speaking from personal experiences, just when I've been challenged, and like you said earlier, even when you're in a yoga posture where you start to feel the brain starts talking, I can't do this. I can't do this. And so how do you remain calm and present? How do you kind of maintain your equanimity? And that your capacity to do that builds, I think, with a yoga practice, with a consistent yoga practice, because you do get into some somewhat uncomfortable positions. We hold our body weight upside down, contorted in different ways. And so
speaking of upside down,
yes,
I when I was practicing Anusara yoga, that was the first time as an adult that I had even attempted like a headstand or a handstand. It's just not, that it's like as adults, as children, and I was always upside down. I was forever flipping over, rolling over, bending over backwards, doing, and at some point it's like, I never went upside down again. And my teacher at the time would just do a section of the class where she'd say, okay, it's like inversion playtime. Like you don't have to do a handstand or a head, but you can do all these different things and you can try. But she just kept saying like, it's all about play. It's not about being perfect. It's like tap into that childlike.
Oops, Lindsay, I just lost you.
I just muted myself.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Oh, that was such a good part too. I love what you're saying here. Okay, you're back. So you were saying,
I muted myself. Professional podcaster.
You're talking about being playful.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just saying, she would encourage us to be playful and talk about how good it is for the brain to kind of be indifferent, see the world from a different perspective, and then it's good for brain development. So getting upside down, and there's not many other, at least as far as I can tell, there's not many other instances in which I'm gonna go upside down consistently in a safe way. And so yoga's been good for that. Do you do a lot of inversions in your type of practice?
So I think it's good to proceed with caution. I do this thing, it's called vinyasa krama. It's this wise progression and, to be safe. I think that's really very important. And we talk about headstands and handstands. I don't advise those unless you're working with a teacher directly. But there are a lot of ways, there are a lot of ways to get your head below your heart. I mean, even a simple forward bend, we call that an inversion. Or going into downward facing dog, which is that like inverted V shape. And that's great for circulation and for getting kind of playful and upside down. So there are lots of ways of doing that. I'm really careful when I go into headstand. The other kind of interesting aspect about these different yoga asanas is they all have a different effect. And so if you got someone who's constantly wanting to go upside down or go into handstand, it can be beneficial. It's definitely energizing, but it can also make a certain type of personality. It can spin that out of control a little bit. And so maybe the best practice for someone like that is to actually come into a seated forward bend or something, which is much more calming.
Right.
So that's the other really interesting aspect I think about yoga is it depends on what it is that you might be needing for your training, or what your desired result is. And for some people, it may be cultivating more energy, more motivation, more core strength. For some people, we really need more time in that rest and recovery mode. We need to be able to sleep better. And so there are certain practices that you can do that enhance that particular quality. So getting upside down isn't the end all be all, but I do like what you're talking about with this kind of playful approach. And I guess I'll tie that into the way that I teach, which is really wanting to encourage people to find what works for them and to be kind of playful about it. I mean, one of the ways that you mentioned Josh and trying to help him do some yoga after all of his biking, my husband is also very athletic and pretty muscle bound, fairly tight, male, strong body. And I think for him, yoga felt like a chore because he couldn't touch his toes, for example, and would like break a sweat trying to make that happen. And so, part of the approach that we've done with him, and he's also been practicing yoga now for a long time, is just finding what feels good and not pushing towards that edge, finding practices that are going to help him with his athletic endeavors. And being kind of playful about it. Like, what feels good? Like, does it, we used to joke that he just loves Shavasana. That's the resting part at the end of the yoga practice. And part of that's great for him because he's so active and he's such go, 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 that it's actually that aspect of a yoga practice, just relaxing, a couple of simple stretches and resting was actually really beneficial and restorative for him.
I like that part too.
Me too. Oh yeah.
I have to say for me,
but for some people, I'll just say, for some people, Shavasana is the hardest part.
Yeah.
They're so fidgety and they can't stand sit still. And I've been in many classes. I've taught many, many classes where I'd have people walk out right before Shavasana.
I was going to say there's people who just fold it up right when the Shavasana is coming.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so I'll often, when I take people into Shavasana, I'll say, okay, this is one of the most important aspects of the practice that you're about to enter into. And this is more of the rest, restore, kind of meditative aspect of the practice, where we're really asking you to, take a little inventory. Is this practice working for you? Is it not? Where does it feel good? Where doesn't it? And to have a deeper connection with what's going to really be fulfilling and meaningful to you. So kind of moving into this deeper layer of awareness, which is another benefit, I think.
If I could even get Josh to a class, he would definitely be a folded up at Shavasana time kind of guy. But I can't even get him into a class. So we're working on it. But so let's just quickly, we don't want to make this podcast too long, but I would like to hear your thoughts on what would be, maybe say you avid triathlete, work out all the time, and maybe you do some strength training, but you aren't really currently doing anything to give yourself, flexibility, mobility, stretch out all the muscle tightness and tension that you get from all of the other things. Kind of what would you recommend that they try or start with, or, I just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I love about yoga is it can be very effective and efficient. I really believe in the efficiency, because one of the things we request in yoga is that you're actually really paying attention to what it is that you're doing, kind of taking this whole mind-body approach. So, a simple practice is, if you have a yoga mat, or even if you don't, you just roll it out and just mindful stretches with your breath, and just staying very focused on what it is that you're doing, and feel everything. And try not to judge it, but feel your way through it. And, a lot of these basic runner stretches and swimming stretches, a lot of them can be traced back to different yoga postures. So it's just part of this yoga thing is just the approach in which you do it. Like some of these like cat-cow stretches, that's kind of a real basic one, just to move your spine and to bring your attention to your breath. So that's one approach, is just to try to be very present when you're stretching and aware of any sensations in your body. Whereas sometimes I think stretching is just one of those things that we just, feel like it's a chore that needs to be finished. Like I think I shared with you after we did a big run in Purissima, it just felt so luxurious to roll out my yoga mat on my back patio. And I just took like an hour. I know it may sound extreme, but I just enjoyed, it felt so good to just move in different ways. And
meanwhile, I stretched at the back of my car for 5 minutes, went back, sat down on my computer and did like 4 more hours of work. And the next day was like, my knees hurt. Why do my knees hurt?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it is interesting, because I felt so good. If I give myself the attention, I mean, an hour is a long time, but if I can mindfully pay attention to my body, it is amazing the way that it reduces injury for me, or even the effect of an injury. Like I just was in a bit of a mountain bike accident a couple weeks ago. Yeah. I mean, I've got bruises all over, but I took, I used my yoga practice as a way to try to heal from that, just by paying attention, by being really mindful, stretching, giving my body. I think one of my theories around injury is that, it's the body really just needing some attention. And so I just think that it helped my recovery time tremendously by taking the time and resting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I was back on my bike. Yeah. Maybe
soon. I was surprised.
Yeah, like 48 hours.
Go for a ride. I was like, okay.
Yeah, I was surprised too, because my neck was completely jacked up, but I just And part of it is, gratefully having a lot of yoga therapeutics training, and that helps. But for the beginner, there's so much online. I think maybe we're going to link to, I have a 10-minute audio yoga file that we may link right to this podcast. So it can be simple. It doesn't have to be anything too complicated. Find a voice that resonates with you. And do what feels good. Yeah.
Yep. I think that's great advice. Try different things. Like we've discussed here, we came in 2 different styles of yoga. But there's so many different ways to do yoga that I think it's one of those situations where you have to kind of go to different classes and try different things till you find the thing that really resonates with you. And it may change over time. Like I went through a period after the Anusara, I went through a period where I was like hot yoga, power core yoga 24/7. I mean, that's all I wanted to do was this vinyasa flow in a room that was 10,000 degrees. And I would just like sweat to death. And I would drink gallons of water. And then I would just be completely spent by the time I was Shavasana, and I would just lay there like a wet towel. But I loved it because it was like, it just emptied me, right? I had all this angst from going through a divorce and whatever, and it just emptied it. And it was great for that, and then I went to a hot yoga. I hadn't been in hot yoga for a while. And I went last year and I was like, it's too hot here, so.
Yeah, I know. It depends on what we're going through, different stages, different ages. And that's why, I think that's great. There's no right way to do it. If it feels like it fits, but I do think it's important to be discerning and to ask, is this working for me? Because I do see people really struggle in trying to make something work that's clearly not working for them.
Right.
And so that's when you need to shift and just find something that's going to enhance your training to help you achieve the goals, the intention that you have, or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Yeah.
And athletes really need to really be mindful about keeping their eyes on their own mat. And what I mean by that is whatever you see anyone else doing, like right now, obviously it's not going to be face-to-face classes anyway, it'd be Zoom class, but it's actually a great time to start as a new person because you're not really able to see what the other people in the class are doing. So as an athlete, you can't get competitive with them, which is good. When I was teaching yoga for athletes, I would have to regularly say, like, don't look at your, neighbor. It doesn't matter, because people were like in downward dog or something, but like looking under their armpit at like the next guy over, right? It's like, and then they're trying to like force their back into the situation. It's like, no. But one thing that's important, no matter what style of yoga that you do, and at least this is what I found, is the teacher's going to give you cues, and they may give you a way to deepen the posture, which is cool. And if you can go there, great. But it's very important to listen to your body, especially as an endurance athlete. You may not be able to replicate exactly what you see the teacher doing, because the teacher may be someone who does yoga every day, all day, and never runs, never does things that are going to tighten up their hips in the way that we, or our hamstrings or whatever, in the way that we do. And you don't want this practice to be something that, causes more injury because you're pushing it. So like if you bend over to touch your toes and you see that the teacher has dropped into a complete fold, and it's her nose on her knees, great. You may only be able to put your hands on your shins. That's okay. Don't try to get your nose to your knee day one, because you'll just end up not being able to run the next day. And it's tempting to, because we're athletes and competitive in other areas, it can be tempting to be like, I'm going to slam my knees down, and my nose down till it hits my knees. And then, think, oh, yoga sucks because I have now a back injury. That's not really the deal. Okay. So as promised, we are going to put 10 minutes of a quick yoga practice from Amy on the end of this podcast. So you can keep it and then just fast forward and just do a little 10 minutes a few times a week. And that would really, I think you'd see the benefits of just doing that, just starting there. And one of the things I wanted to do since I started this podcast was to do some little yoga here and there within the podcast of different postures that I think support our sports. And so I'm planning to be doing those in the coming months. I've got some big work thing coming at the end of this month. And then after that, so Mike started a YouTube page for us. And so I'm planning to put some, and maybe I'd put some of Amy up too. That would be great. Just a quick video showing you like a specific posture, like this is cat cow. Here you go. And this is why you would do it. So that'll be coming up too, I think, in the next couple months. So that if you want to see some basic postures, you can.
Yay, that's great, Lindsay. That's exciting.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. I really liked teaching athletes, yoga for athletes. It was because those are my peeps. That's my jam. That's right. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it, but I just don't have time to do any kind of teaching right now. But I thought, some quick videos would be helpful to the community if they wanted to see them. Yes. And, I'm inspired by you, so that helps. Yeah. Any last little, words of wisdom or anything?
Oh, I just feel like the benefits of any kind of yoga, there's so many things from, other things we've talked about, balance and focus. And I can see how it would just enhance any training program. There's just so many aspects. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I hope that if you haven't tried it, that you'll go out and do a little research and give it a try.
Yeah. And I'll put links to Amy's, because Amy's teaching some great Zoom classes right now. And you can just donate through, I think it's PayPal, right? They're amazing. So they're live classes. So we'll put links to your stuff in there in the show notes, Amy, so people can, if they want to just check you out, since they've just heard you, they can do that too. And
thanks. Yeah, I'm teaching.
10-minute thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm teaching. I'm just teaching right now through a yoga studio here in Half Moon Bay. Mm-hmm. So we'll put that link up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's great. It's on Kelly. If we ever get back to doing in-person stuff, highly recommend. You can hear the ocean, the waves while you're practicing. I mean, it's pretty.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm looking out over the Pacific Ocean right now as I'm talking to you. It's a pretty nice location. Yeah.
Life is rough.
I know.
We're very lucky. And I'm grateful that you came on today and spent time talking to me about this. And I'll see you in a few hours when you and I go on a bike ride with Corinne.
Sounds good. All right, Lindsay. Very good. Right, thanks for having me.
This is your 2-minute warm-up. Come to your hands and knees on your yoga mat. We call this tabletop. Shoulders right out over your wrists. Knees slightly behind the hips. We'll begin with a cat-cow stretch. Dip the chin, scoop your tailbone, and arch your spine up toward the sky. Breathe out. As you inhale, soften the heart, lift your chin, belly gets full. Tilt the pelvis the other direction, and you'll go back and forth a couple more times. Warming the spine. And the next exhale as you arch your spine into the cat pose. Take your hips back towards your heels and into child's pose. Gently roll your head from side to side. Next inhale, come back up into hands and knees, tabletop. Tuck your toes under, lift the knees, stretch your thighs back in downward facing dog. Just warming up. Bend your right knee deeply and take a peek out under your left armpit. Change legs, same thing, other side. Left knee bends. Then back into tabletop, draw your hips back toward your heels. Spine stays long for extended child's pose. Keep your arms outstretched in front of you and then bring both arms over to the right side. Hips draw back towards your heels, full breath in, and a long side body stretch halfway through. Arms back to the center. Over to the left side, same thing, deep breath in to open the right side of the ribcage. Back to center, up into hands and knees, and we'll do a little hip rotation. Take your shoulders forward out over the fingertips and drop the hips down, and then circle your hips to the right side, making a big circle. And then to the left side, a big circle in the other direction. And then back to neutral. Tuck those toes under and sit back on your heels, body upright. Interlace your fingers, lift your arms up overhead, turning your palms toward the sky if that's comfortable. Big stretch here and a breath. Float your arms down to your sides and untuck the toes. Shift your hips to one side, bring your legs around in front of you for a cross-legged seated position. This is your 6-minute yoga postures practice. You'll start by standing at the top of your mat, feet about hip distance apart, nice and stable. And take a full breath in, arms up overhead, fingertips touch, and hands now down to your heart. You'll fold all the way into a forward bend, Uttanasana. And now pranam, a full breath in as your spine extends, chest lifts, forward fold on exhale. You keep your knees bent. Take a breath. Place your hands down on the mat, walk your feet back into plank, shoulders out over your wrists, strong body. And now knees to the floor, spine neutral as you lower to the ground. Root your hips and inhale as you lift your head and heart into cobra pose. Exhale, dip your forehead, spine neutral. Press into your hands and knees, tabletop, and then lift those knees and hips up and back into downward facing dog. Stay here for a few breaths. Bend your knees, pedal back into your heels. Keep it dynamic. Shift your hips from side to side. And now come to neutral. Bend your knees evenly as you stretch your hips back toward the wall behind you. Your navel will draw in, spine and back will get a nice stretch. Soften your shoulders. Draw your belly in toward the spine. Inhale, plank pose, core engaged. And then back into downward facing dog on exhale. And do that 2 more times. You inhale into plank and exhale, downward facing dog. From down dog, extend your right leg up and back behind you, gaze up between your hands, and step that right foot forward, lunge. Drop your left heel down and in. Keep your legs steady. Lift your torso and arms up into Warrior One, Virabhadrasana. Soft shoulders, strong core. Take a full breath in. And straighten that front leg. Lift those toes and fold out over that front leg for a nice hamstring stretch. And now to triangle pose. Your right hand somewhere along the right leg or the floor. Root into both feet. Left hand, left hip. And then left arm reaches up toward the sky and can even extend out over your head toward the front of the mat. And from there, bring that hand all the way down to the floor and pivot your body back into lunge. Root both hands and take that right leg up and back behind you for one-legged dog, Ekapada Adho Svanasana. Now to plank pose with that right leg up if you'd like, engage your core. And then put that right leg down to the ground for stability as you lower into half push-up, Chaturanga Dandasana, into upward facing dog or cobra. Push back into downward facing dog and take a full breath. Now the same thing, this time with your left foot forward. Lift the leg up and bring that foot forward right up between your hands, lunge. Drop your right heel down to the floor, back leg strong, and lift your torso and arms up into Warrior One. Soft shoulders, enjoy your breath. Straighten that front leg, lift your toes, and melt your torso out over your left thigh for a nice stretch on this side. Into triangle pose. Place your left hand along the leg or onto the floor outside of that front foot. Root your feet and take your right hand to your right hip. And then extend that arm up, reaching toward the sky. If you'd like, extend your upper arm out over your head and toward the front of your mat. Now bring that same arm all the way down to the floor. Pivot your body back into lunge. Root both hands and take that left leg up and back behind you. And drop into plank with that left leg still up and place the left foot next to the right. Try knees up off the floor into Chaturanga. Pause here. Try not to dip your shoulders any lower than your elbows. And then lift your heart and open those shoulders into upward facing dog. back into downward facing dog, and take 2 full breaths here. Look up between your hands and walk your feet toward the top of your mat, pranam. Lift your chest and fold forward, a deep forward bend. Press your feet into the floor and come all the way up. Reach your arms up overhead, hands together, and bring this gesture down to your heart. Utkatasana. Heel toe your feet together. Big toes touch. Slight gap between your heels. Bend your knees. Draw your hips back like you're sitting in a chair. Lift your toes. Scoop the tailbone slightly to engage your navel, your core. Extend your arms out. Upper arms aligned with your ears. Breathe. This is designed to be intense and to create some heat. So draw that intensity from your thighs up into your belly. This is like your shot of pranic espresso. You are cultivating this energy from the inside. Breathe in, reach your arms up, straighten your legs, and then fold at the hip creases, arms out at your sides, down into Uttanasana, forward bend. Hands onto the mat, bend your knees and walk your feet back, downward facing dog. Nice long spine, bend your knees towards your toes and really stretch those hips back. You'll feel your navel draw in. Take your knees to the floor, shift your hips back to your heels, child's pose. Soften here. Press into your foundation and lift your chest up into hero pose. Shift your hips to one side and bring your legs around and in front of you for a cross-leg seated position. Take a gentle twist to each side. Finish both sides. And our final posture, bring the soles of your feet together. Knees drop out to either side, cobbler's pose. Forward bend. And now sit up. Draw your knees together and stretch your legs out long. Shake your legs out a little bit on the mat. And then recross your legs and place your hands together at your heart center. A gentle bow will conclude this yoga postures practice. Your 2-minute Shavasana. Stretch your body out onto the floor, arms long at your sides and a nice distance from your body, palms face up. Relax your legs and let your feet splay apart. A long breath in through your nose. As you exhale, release and find stillness. On your next full breath in through your nose, this time let it out through your mouth with a sigh. Your lips come together and the breath continues in and out through your nose. Your bones become heavy. Feel the connection of your body to the earth beneath you. Your whole body continues to settle on each exhalation. The back of your head becomes heavy and relaxed. Your face softens. If your attention wanders, gently bring it back to the sensation of whole body, mind, and spirit at ease. You are welcome to stay here as long as you like.